Michael Boyle's StrengthCoach.com presents the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. PerformBetter.com.
All right, hey everybody, welcome to episode 338 of the Strength Coach Podcast, brought to you by Perform Better, the experts in functional training and rehabilitation. Check them out at PerformBetter.com. I'm your host, Anthony Renner. The show notes are located at ContinueFit.com. That's my site. Or you can go to StrengthCoachPodcast.com. That'll take you right there as well. All right, today on the StrengthCoach.com and NBSC.TV Coaches Corner, I spoke to Coach Boyle about the new StrengthCoach.com. That's right, they have a new format, new software. It just relaunched, so we're going to talk all about that. Talked about leg extensions and why he's considering them and using them with his son. We also talked about his Coach's Minute, where he talked about how workouts should not be hard, they should be cumulative. And we finished up with how strength work has evolved in his programming. Okay, Naamly, it's the member experience platform for modern training gyms. Puts all of your communication with your members in one place, allowing you to keep track of that communication. So important for retention. Go to Naamly.com. Guys, you can schedule a demo and you can get a feel for what this software is all about and what it can do for you and your business. Use the referral code StrengthCoach to get started on your free 30-day trial. All right, for the Naamly Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach segment, I have on Gray Cook. It was great to have him back on. He's obviously the co-founder of Functional Movement Systems, author of Athletic Body and Balance back in the day, and most recently Movement a few years ago. Has a new book out called The Business of Movement. We talked about really the overview of FMS since the 90s. We're going to talk about the differences in the different segments of FMS, SFMA, FCS, etc. He's going to define what he means by movement culture and how he feels there's some obstacles in our way in relation to movement. We're going to talk about some self-care, about the red, yellow, green light system, and we're going to go into some different topics in his new book, The Business of Movement. So that's coming up with Gray in a little while. For the KISS Marketing Business Secrets for Gym Owners with Vince Gabriele, Vince actually hasn't sent me he's supposed to send it to me yesterday. So I always call him overtime. I'm going to call him not on time now. But, obviously it's going to be, the segment will be about business. So Vince always comes up with some great stuff. I will give him a hard time on the next special episode about that. KISS Marketing is a digital marketing agency that helps fitness business owners make the big bucks from their marketing without feeling stupid stressed or wasting valuable time figuring it out on your own. If you need some help with your marketing, head over to kissmarketing.net to book a free coaching call with Will Matheson. That is Vince Gabriele's secret marketing weapon. All right, getting started with VBT or velocity-based training. Last episode, we had a full interview with Spencer Arnold talking about VBT. So, that was hooked up by Perch, so they co-sponsored that. But this week, we're back with a separate segment. Nika is going to talk about VBT and On-Field Performance. He's going to bring up a couple studies about the transfer of VBT onto the field. Good stuff coming up from Nika in a little while. Guys, the summits are back. A couple weeks away from Chicago. I am speaking there. Vince is actually speaking there as well. Marco Sanchez, Pat Van Galen, so many others. July 15th to the 17th in Chicago. And then August 26th to the 28th in Providence, Rhode Island. Check it all out at PerformBetter.com. Guys, lots of things to get to. So let's get on the phone with Coach Boyle. All right, now it's time for the StrengthCoach.com and NBSC.TV Coaches Corner with Coach Boyle. You can try the new StrengthCoach.com out for 7 days for free. Totally new format. We're going to talk all about it. Very user-friendly. The same great forum. It's a place where top coaches in the industry come to connect and learn. It's really like a social network of real coaches and fitness professionals to help you learn and elevate your career. Coach, how you doing?
I am doing well, Anthony. How are you?
All right. So exciting times. I didn't want to talk about it last time because it was kind of in the middle of the migration of the site. But newstrengthcoach.com, new look, looking good. And all the forum posts have now migrated over. And so it's going to take, for those new member or old members, it's going to just take a little bit of time to be like, ooh, I don't like that. We don't like change at first, but it's really organized and the forum's the same for the most part. But one really cool feature I like on the forum is when you click on the forum, what it will tell you, it has like a thin red line. It says, since your last visit. So everything you haven't seen yet since your last visit is above that line. So just one of the cool features. Talk to me about the new strengthcoach.com.
Well, it's interesting. I'm just getting used to it myself in terms of figuring that stuff out. Okay, last visit and trying to figure out new threads. There is a little bit of change. And you know me, I love change. I'm so good at that. So anyway, but it's going to be much better. We're working on a better sort of homepage, landing page, because right now you just sort of land on the article categories, and we want to get that to be improved a little bit so that it's a little bit more like the old site where you can see what's most recent that's been up or that's been added. So there's going to be some improvements, but I think the big thing is we're getting a little better provider in terms of Inspire 360, who's been really good with the Body by Boyle Online. And I think overall the long-term prospects of this will be really, really good because the people, Grace and Ravi who have done this thing, they're super smart. And, we'd been dealing before with, I don't want to badmouth by name, but with an older membership type software that I just don't think they were very concerned about the people they were providing the service to. Whereas Inspire is very concerned. Inspire has a vision, I think, of really leading the world in fitness education. So they're doing stuff with CFSC, with Body by Boyle Online, with Strength Coach. They're really proactive people.
Very cool. And again, the dashboard, like you said, when you go on the dashboard, it's kind of like just these big red boxes. There is a new release box, but I'm sure there's nothing in there yet because obviously they're still doing that, and things are a little bit out of order. But again, those are no big deal. The cool thing is everybody's receptive. You and Kevin and Brendan are very receptive to getting some feedback, and I'm sure you're going to get a lot of feedback in terms of, hey, I used to like seeing this, or I used to like seeing that. So you're going to get all that, and so it'll happen and it'll come together.
Yes, and I think there's different things where if you look kind of the way that whatever the top bar looks, you can see, bonuses, discounts, downloads. I think it's a little more of what people are used to looking at on the web. Whereas, as you know, the old software, all the sites that were done in that software looked very much alike. And if you weren't, they just hadn't updated the formats in a long time. You'd updated it, I know, on your own. And I think there was a lot of kind of effort that had to go into trying to improve things that will hopefully get a lot simpler this time around.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Coach, let's talk about, you've been asking on Twitter about leg extensions. Where are you with leg extensions? Are you revisiting it? What's going on?
Yeah, I'm revisiting it because, and I've said this before, when you have skin in the game, when it's your own kid, you're going to do whatever you got to do. I'm not going to stand around and think, well, I don't do leg extensions. If I really feel like leg extension is something that's going to help him in. So I've listened to a bunch of podcasts. Actually, I don't know how to say her name, Nicole. I want to say it's Siderka and Eric Miera. There's a bunch of young PTs who are, I think, starting to fill space that maybe was once filled by Gary Gray and Gray Cook and people like that, people that are social media savvy and that are putting out content. And everybody seems to be very pro leg extension. I am clearly anti-leg extension, not as much for the non-functional part, which I don't think it's functional at all, but I just always found personally that my knees did not feel good when I did leg extensions. I did not like, and this goes back, well into the 1980s. When I did leg extensions, my knees just didn't feel good. And so when the functional training thing came along and people said, oh, and by the way, they're not, it doesn't make sense to do them because that's not the way your quad worked. I was very happy to never do them again and never have the equipment. But if this is going to be the best way for my son to gain his quadricep strength back, and that's the difficult thing with the post ACL recovery is regaining quadricep strength, then hey, if it's leg extensions, it is. But it's interesting. He's having a little patellar tendon pain, and he's been tolerating isometrics better than concentrics. So we haven't really done the concentric, eccentric sort of version of the leg extension, but we are doing some both some open chain and closed chain holds that we've been playing around with, trying to see if we can impact that tendon site a little bit more directly.
Where are you doing them? Because you don't have a leg extension machine.
Right off the Kaiser. You can just put a foot loop on the Kaiser and sit on a box. So that's what we've been doing, is just sitting on a plyo box and hooking it on. So it's easy enough to do. We did some double leg ones, holding an ultimate sandbag kind of up with their feet.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to play around with things that will get better isolated quad recruitment, because at least what the research seems to be showing is that as people are trying to get strong, if they're struggling with their quadricep, they will tend to shift load everywhere else that they can, hip, glute, whatever it is. So as a result, some people have said, I still don't agree. I think you can get it. I think we can get it with split squats. I think we can get it with other things, but I'm not going to get, again, I try to not get stuck in opinion, in terms of, hey, I believe this, therefore I'm not going to try things. I believe, I'm not a leg extension fan, but if someone said to me, this is a way to get your kid healthy, then we're doing leg extensions. No problem.
Yeah. Now, can we argue, and I don't know, I have no idea, that this is like a little bit different because it's not on this kind of fixed machine with the cable. Is this really, do you think this is any different? Because, and if we do them one at a time, obviously you could do one at a time on a machine, but if you're doing them on the cable machine, is there something to that that's maybe different?
I don't think there's that much that's different. No, I just think that there are times, it's kind of like I've always been with upper body stuff. I've always been an isolated rotator cuff person, in spite of the fact that a lot of the quote unquote functional people said, don't do internal external rotation. It doesn't matter. It's not what the muscles do. And I agree. It's certainly not what the muscles do. But I have also found that when I have somebody who's weak, that if I can get them doing internal and external rotation, that their shoulders tend to feel better. So we do a lot of internal external rotation, in spite of the fact that many experts, quote unquote, have said not to do that. And I think you have to be careful in your rigidity and realize that what matters is the result. And if you have to do something that maybe you don't love, then you do it. Who knows? We might be front squatting with him next, right? He might find that front squats feel better than whatever. So, something else that we were thinking about doing. And if what I can get to pain-free happens to be an exercise that I'm not necessarily in love with, like we're doing a sort of a leg press version on the shuttle. I mean, I'm certainly not a leg press person either, but you've got to find ways to get these muscles working in a way that's pain-free and that's not contributing to the tendon pain.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I was doing that exact, the leg extensions on kind of the shuttle. It wasn't the shuttle, but it was the same idea. And so I was able to do those. So that felt good. What about Spanish? Those, I know.
We tried Spanish squat was good yesterday. I'm going to try a little bit more of that tomorrow and see how that goes. But again, bilateral, right? We don't believe in that either.
Well, it's funny, you're going to laugh, but there's actually an infomercial type product called the DB method. And it's probably like a Shark Tank thing too. And it has like these two handles, like almost like two ski poles, let's call them, in the front. And it's like almost like a seesaw where you sit on it. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, this is the only piece, but it's in my little condo gym. And so I was just trying with it. And I'm like, oh my God, this is, and I do it because I can hold on, and we could do this with a TRX probably too, but I hold on to those things like you're supposed to. And you're basically kind of doing like the same idea with like a vertical tibia, and I'm able to kind of take some weight off to get to full flexion because I still, I have some arthritis in that right knee anyway. Never mind, obviously I'm 8 months out from the surgery, but I could still like full flexion is still like, oh, it's a little tough. But I can get some range of motion work without any weight on the stupid DB method thing. And I was thinking of you the other day. I meant to take a video and a picture and send it to you.
Looking at it right now,
okay,
very similar to the Spanish squat idea in terms of trying to get you to sit back, and it's a deloader. So I would look at it and think, hey, perfect. I mean, what we're looking for in this sort of early ACL process is we're looking to get some fatigue in the quadricep. And we're looking to do that in a way that's pain-free. Well, whatever that is, I could care less. Whatever it takes to get to that point, that's what you should be doing.
Yep. It's funny on that thing, I thought the person put it together wrong, but I looked on the website because you put your feet on these pegs and it elevates the front of your foot, not the heel. So it's not a heel raise, it's like a toe raise. I'm like, they did this wrong. It should be the other way around. So, but I just thought that was...
If they're trying to get you to sit back, maybe not.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not. True.
Certainly not knees over toes when you're doing it that way.
There you go. Oh, boy. Coach, let's...
fan the flames,
Yeah, there you go. Let's talk really quick about... For people that didn't see your Coach's Minute, I just like this quote. I think there's so much to interpret with it. The first one was, don't judge the program by the first week. But you said workouts should not be hard. They should be cumulative. Can you expand on that for the people that haven't seen that?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because what happens invariably is we get some complaints the first week, parent complaints mostly. Oh, my kid's not sore. My kid didn't leave sweating. And what we realize is we're trying to get the parents to understand that the workouts shouldn't be hard. They should be cumulative in the sense that every day it's a little harder than it was the day before. And so none of them in and of themselves, you might think, oh my God, that was hard. But if you looked at where you would be in week 6 versus where you were in week 1, you would think, wow, I can't believe I'm doing this. Because you've done it in a cumulative way, you end up in a situation where you've been able to add in a little bit, and suddenly you look at it and think, wow, I've really come a long way in 10 weeks. But in none of these situations was I physically exhausted, so sore I couldn't move, that kind of thing. And the opposite, we find these competitors. We have a guy now who's running workouts in his backyard for one team. And their first workout, everybody was 95-pound squat to failure. And one very competitive young man apparently did 55 squats at 95 pounds and was literally crippled. He can't walk. You think, well, how is this day one for somebody? But it's amazing. We just don't realize the bubble. I think that's what I always keep looking at is the bubble. We live in our own little bubble where we look at this and we think that we know and that everybody has similar thoughts. And what I've realized is I need to put these thoughts out there in terms of, hey, just look at this, look at it as building blocks and think that all you need is one block today. And then 2 and then 3, in the first week, you get 4 blocks. Second week, now you've built that up. You've got 8 blocks. The third week, you've got 12 blocks. Eventually this structure that you're building will be 40 blocks big, but you've built it 1 block at a time. Everything was 1/40th of what was coming. The flip side of that, it's really funny. I remember at BU one time we had a freshman goalie come in. He looked at me and he said, first day, he said, oh my God, that's the hardest workout I've ever done in my life. And I remember looking at him and saying, his name was Grant Rollheiser. I was like, Grant, the bad news about that is every workout from here on in is going to be the hardest workout of your life because they're all going to be harder than that.
Nice.
So that's the flip side of it, right? Is that every workout's going to be harder than the one. It's very rare for us that we go back and do a workout that was easy, where someone thinks, oh, that was easier than last week. That doesn't happen. But at the same time, it's very rare that someone thinks, oh my God, that was like, why did we do that? That was crazy. We don't have these kind of crazy variations in either volume and or intensity that would result in kids being significantly or extremely sore.
Yeah, it's kind of silly. Coach, really quick, last thing. You on a thread, you were talking about, look, for 40 years, I believe that strength was a large component of speed. I now know that it's a far smaller piece of the pie than I thought. It seems like you keep even thinking, you still believe in it, but different thoughts, different goals. Has the programming, like in general, like changed from that perspective to say, listen, we really need to change this up and take some of the focus off this?
I don't think the programming has changed. No, I think when I'm writing or tweeting in those particular situations, I'm trying to get across to the people, and these are the people, and this was the particular two guys on Twitter that were doing this. I mean, they're big, strong guys. One of them, I think, actually produced the West Side versus the World documentary. So obviously he's got again, when you think of what's his lens, well, his lens is strength. And when somebody's lens is strength, much like how I used to be, you want to really believe that it matters. And I think it matters. I just don't think it matters as much as I did before. And I think it matters for different things. I think strength is still really important for injury prevention. I was having a conversation with one of our interns today about hockey and collisions. And I always say hockey is the only sport where they've put an inanimate object in the field of play. You've got the boards. So you could conceivably hit the boards at 20 miles an hour. You need to be really strong to absorb a collision at 20 miles an hour with something that's not going to move. In much the same way, you need to be really strong to absorb a collision with another person who may be moving 20 miles an hour. And that can happen in both football and in ice hockey. But specifically when it comes to the ability to run fast, I don't think it's as big a deal as people want to make it out to be. And I think there's a lot of guys who really struggle with that concept. And I would say 100% males, 100% people with a sort of heavy strength powerlifting type background. And they just don't want to look at that and say, it's so hard to look at it and think, wow, I may have been wrong, and I may have been wrong for a really long time. And I look at that in my situation and think I'm not I guess I'm not intimidated by that. I'm not afraid that, oh, wow, I was wrong. And I think I was wrong for a really long time.
Yeah, good stuff. I mean, and I was going to say, when you talked about that list of people, I would say older coaches, right? Older strength coaches who really focused on that and would have a hard time really changing.
I would say both of these guys, I would classify them as younger relative to the fact that they are younger than me. And I would say they might both be 40 or under. So in some ways I would look at that and think, but I think it's more biased than old. I think it's people who have a powerlifting type of background are the people who just can't get their arms around the fact that, wait a second, there may be more to this. And I think over time they'll realize, I mean, I remember when I first heard Tony Holler start saying this, it rubbed me the wrong way. But then it led me to investigate Tony's work further, because I said, wait a second, here's a guy who's having a lot of success with speed, who's saying that he doesn't think the weight room is important. And I got to at least listen and read and try to wrap my arms around why he's saying the things that he's saying. And then the more I looked into his information, the more he was very clear that, hey, I have guys that aren't lifting at all, that are just printing and doing plyos, that are getting as fast as my football players or faster who are in the weight room lifting. And again, I think in some situations, and you know me, I always kind of say I go back and forth on research and data and things like that, but you can't ignore somebody's data completely. You can't look at that and say, wait a second, I don't believe that his data is true, because I want to look at that and think, I mean, obviously I look at someone like Tony. Why would a guy like Tony lie in terms of he's an older guy who's a high school coach. He doesn't have any incentive. He's not selling. I mean, now he's been selling more. They're doing their RPR, and they're doing their TFC stuff. But in general, there isn't a product that he's making money off of that would cause him to maybe say things that weren't true. So that to me really makes me look and think, why? What's the other reason? And then the other reason, obviously, is because it's true, because this is what he's experiencing. And I think that's the part that you have to look at.
With Tony especially, I think, he doesn't tie things to any products ever. It's not like, hey, this is what I'm doing and buy this product. It's more of I also have these products, or I'm also putting on this thing. So I respect that. So
he's just one of those guys too. I hate to say that he's above lying, but he's a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old former high school chemistry teacher. He just doesn't have the profile of somebody who's going to bullshit you on the internet.
Yeah, true. All right. Well, good stuff, Coach. We'll leave you on that note. Have a great 4th of July weekend. Hopefully you're heading up to Maine, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right. You too, Ann. Thank you. As always, thank you for everything you do.
All right, guys, I just want to remind you about 2 things I'm using to try to stay healthy. First one is Athletic Greens. It's my green drink. It is 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food sourced superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens. I use it every day. One of the things, they probably won't want me telling you this, but I try to use it sometimes before I go drinking as well, just to kind of get some vitamins in, or even after drinking. So that, to me, is another added benefit of the Athletic Greens. Also, I recommend getting the subscription. You get 20% off. You can cancel or skip it anytime. And to make it easy, they're going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. The travel packs are great. I just got back from New York, brought 5 of them, and kind of help me stay on track. So visit athleticgreens.com/strengthcoach to get that offer. And I want to tell you about Inside Tracker. If you haven't heard of them, what a great tool to kind of keep track of what's happening inside your body with your biomarkers, which is basically just a biological indicator of your body's internal condition. That's what you're doing with Inside Tracker. You are looking under the hood. Now, these biomarkers are measured in blood, and tracking them at regular intervals over time, following a personalized plan to improve them, is a great way to transform your overall health, longevity, performance, and well-being. I'll tell you another thing. I went to the doctor when I was in New York, and I got my blood work done there as well. And I'd done Inside Tracker in October, and then I did it again in March. And my cholesterol was a little high in March. So obviously I've been trying to focus on that. But I will say, although it's still a little high from, with my doctor, the cool thing was I was able to tell him, like, look, this was where I was at in March. So I'm really kind of trying to keep track of that and stay on top of it to make sure that I'm healthy. And what's cool is you can also partner with Inside Tracker to work with your clients. So you have to use it first, but it's another added benefit to, make an additional revenue stream and to help your clients stay healthy too. But you can get 20% off. Use the code RENAPRO20. That's my last name, RENNA Pro20. You get 20% off. If you have any questions, let me know.
Hey guys, what's up? It's Vince Gabriele. Welcome to Business Secrets for Gym Owners. I have an interesting topic today. I'm going to kind of not go away from business, but go in a different direction today and tell you about my son, Joey. And he has been doing jiu-jitsu for about a year now and it came up that he was going to do a tournament at his school. And it was one of those, little tournaments. It was all just the kids he rolls with, normally, but they just, brought in a judge and, or a referee and had a scorekeeper and things like that. And so he had his first one, and he won his first match via submission in an armbar, and won his second match 12-2, and had a lot of confidence going in, and he was feeling good and excited. And something interesting happened. We got an email to go to a big tournament down in. So we live in North Jersey, down in South Jersey, and it was one of these big venues where there was multiple mats and lots of people and things like that. So it was the real deal. And I asked him if he wanted to do it. He went back and forth, and we decided to do it. And he went against a kid. And he started out strong, got a takedown, and then he made a mistake. And he was supposed to I don't remember exactly, but he was supposed to do something, and he did something else. And the guy took his back, and the kid choked him out. And so my 6-year-old son got choked out, and it was an interesting thing to watch. But he came off, and he was upset, and I think he was upset because. Not so much that he lost. I think he was he never felt that kind of pressure on his neck. So it was a very new feeling for him. And I think it was almost like a shock. So he comes off, he's very upset, he's crying. And, I think, after a while we talked about it, and he realized, the mistake that he made, and we talked about it with the sensei. And it was a learning experience. And on the next day, I got another email for another tournament in September. And I looked at him and I said, "Hey, Joey, do you want to do another tournament?" And he looked at me and he said, "Yes, Dad, I want to do another tournament." And I was like, awesome. And the reality is, I think in business, the thing that holds us back, that keeps us stagnant, is feeling the choke, is feeling the pressure of something that is very new and somewhat uncomfortable. And we feel that feeling, and then we don't want to feel that feeling again, so we shy away from ever going there again. And if you really think about it, there's stages in business, right? There's a stage where we do all the work ourselves, or we're the sole person in the gym. And then we start, we find a staff member and we start hiring people. And then we have to start, doing things like marketing and building a team and, all things like that. And the reality is, all those things that you have to do that are new can be scary and almost feel like, you're being choked. And the reality is, when you feel those feelings, the goal is to really look at those as learning experiences. Right, to look at that. And I look at my son losing that match. I wasn't upset at all that he lost the match. And I was quietly almost a little happy to really keep him humble and to teach him a lesson and everything like that. But the reality is, all the stuff, the bad stuff that you go through in business, the challenges that you go through, the times that you feel like you're squeezed, all of those are where all the growth happens. And if you always feel where that growth is, and then you kind of retreat, you don't go back and do another match, you don't go back and try another tournament, you're never going to create breakthroughs. And so what the advice today is to look at those time periods in your business where you feel like you're getting choked, where you feel like you're getting squeezed, and understand that even though it's uncomfortable, these are all necessary things for business growth, necessary things to break through and get to the next level. So hopefully this was helpful. Again, as always, and I think I'm under time on this one, Ant. But as always, if you want more help and want more advice on business, on marketing, on getting more clients, you can go to club.vincegabriele.com and start a $1 trial in my coaching program. That's just club.vincegabriele.com. And hopefully I will see you in there. Thanks so much, and I'll see you next week. Peace.
Hey everyone, welcome to Getting Started with VBT or Velocity-Based Training, brought to you by Perch, a 3D camera-based weight room technology solution bringing VBT into the 21st century. I am Nika Ouellette, and I'm the head of marketing and education for Perch. In this new series on the Strength Coach podcast, we cover all things related to VBT, so we can go ahead and dive right in. This week, we want to cover VBT and on-field performance. Most strength coaches would agree that it does not matter what we do in the weight room if it does not translate to on-field performance. The weight room, while pivotal to performance, is supplemental to the wins and losses that happen on the field of play. Now, at this point, it is clear that velocity-based training can help make athletes stronger, faster, and more powerful in the weight room. But again, the most important thing is if these adaptations affect on-field performance. So let's dig into a 2011 study by Randall et al. Called Effect of Instantaneous Performance Feedback During 6 Weeks of Velocity-Based Resistance Training on Sport-Specific Performance Tests. In this study, researchers compared velocity in the squat jump with feedback given and not given. Performance was compared in the vertical jump, horizontal jump, and 10, 20, and 30-meter sprint. This testing took place pre and post 6 weeks of training. 13 professional rugby players underwent the protocol, and after 6 weeks, performance in the horizontal jump and the 30-meter sprint showed the most significant improvement, with the probability of that velocity feedback being beneficial 83% and 99% respectively. That means that VBT feedback was pivotal to those improvements in performance. Now, the vertical jump, 10 and 20-meter sprints showed statistically insignificant improvement, but improvement nonetheless. Another great study by Orange et al. From 2019 called Effects of In-Season Velocity versus Percentage-Based Training in Academy Rugby League Players compared percentage-based in-season training against velocity-based in-season training. They evaluated 27 rugby league players. Performance was compared in the back squat, 1 rep max, counter movement jump, and 30-meter sprint. After 7 weeks of training, VBT yielded higher session mean velocity and mean power in the back squat. All the while, time under tension and perceived stress were actually lower compared to percentage-based training. The counter movement jump height and 1 rep max squat improved in both groups. But overall, this is the important part, the researchers deemed VBT to be beneficial in season to improve lower body training stimuli and also help decrease training stress and promote velocity-specific adaptations. So what does this all mean? We say this a lot at Perch HQ, but data for data's sake is meaningless. So we need to measure progress and ensure that what we do in the weight room positively impacts on-field performance, so we give our athletes the best chance of success. And the VBT does nothing else. The immediate feedback teaches athletes young and old how to try hard. We touched on VBT being a misnomer in episode 3 and how VBT could more effectively be called intent-based training. Teach an athlete how to try hard, and if they try hard, they will inherently improve. The benefit of VBT can be as simple as that, and you can watch athletes thrive in the weight room and on the field of play if they get that velocity feedback session to session. That is all for today. Thank you all for listening. And if you have any more questions about velocity-based training or want more information and special deals, please head to perch.fit/strengthcoach. That is perch.fit/strengthcoach. Thank you so much.
All right, now it's time for the Naamly Hit the Gym with the Strength Coach segment, brought to you by Naamly, the ultimate retention tool designed specifically for fitness coaches and gyms to help your members stay longer and pay longer. Go to Naamly.com, schedule your demo to get a feel for what you can do with this incredible tool. Use the referral code Strength Coach to get started on a free 30-day trial. All right, today I have on my old friend Greg Cook. He is a physical therapist, orthopedic certified specialist, and certified strength and conditioning coach. His developments in movement pattern screening and assessment are at the forefront of fitness, physical conditioning, injury prevention, and physical rehabilitation. He's distinguished among manual therapists for his degree of precision, accuracy, and consistency in considering movement as a behavior, mapping and deconstructing movement patterns, and rebuilding movement following natural development path. He's the co-founder of Functional Movement Movement Systems and the author of Athletic, Body and Balance and Movement. And his most recent book is The Business of Movement. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. He was on this podcast for Functional Movement Systems was on the podcast for 12 years. He was on it putting out fires for about 5 or 6 years. He always did the segment, and he has his own podcast with Lee Burton now called The Movement Podcast. So make sure you check that out. Great. Thanks for doing this, bud.
No, man, this is fun. It seems like old times. It was like, what, a moment ago?
I know.
Back and forth on every little issue or inconvenience the movement screen created. And just to give your listeners some feedback, it was probably 96 or 97. I just started seeing recurring patterns and, was getting called in as an orthopedic guy, but having that strength coach background made me see, all right, the stuff I do here looks like that downstream. And what I realized, whether it was low back pain in adults or ACLs in athletes, if you had a touch with rehab, that didn't vaccinate you to shit. If anything, it seemed to increase the prevalence of the problem. And what I'm saying there is somebody who blows an ACL goes through the exact endorsed current standard of practice to rehab that ACL, and yet they're more likely to have another one, but it doesn't necessarily matter which side. Meaning, is the knee actually vulnerable on the other side too, or are you behaving in ways that put unnatural stress on your knee while you're allowing your hip and your ankle to be conveniently tight? And that can easily be demonstrated by a physical therapist with a goniometer, or you could pretty much say the same thing about somebody who couldn't deep squat. So we started looking at these movement patterns saying, let's go global. If there's a problem, we can work back local, but let's quit doing local stuff, because just because somebody checks out on the table doesn't mean they got a good looking squat or a symmetrical lunge or anything. So we saw back in the day, both trainers and PTs were really good at the microscopic analysis of joint, muscle, tissue, fascia, whatever. But when you have to throw it all together, if my mom's been in knee rehab for 3 weeks and still has pain going downstairs, I think I can call you out and say, you're missing something, right? You're missing something. It's either worse than we thought, or this is not just a structural problem. She's participating in that. So the movement screen allowed us on people at pre-participation for athletics and fitness to do this body scan head to toe. And we didn't do it with force plates and cameras because they just weren't developed at the time, but we tried to peel it down to 10 minutes and we tried to remove fitness and capacity from it. So I just want to basically boil it down to, when I put you in this pattern, what's stopping you? Your freedom or your control? So when somebody's like laying on their back doing a leg raise or reaching behind their back to touch both hands, they're either going to basically nail it or say they feel tight. Or if I put them on one leg or a narrow lunge, they're either not going to be able to complete the pattern because they feel tight, or they're not going to be able to complete the pattern because they lose their balance. So I don't ask people, if they have mobility or motor control or flexibility problems. They're getting ready to tell me in a movement pattern. And the only template we really used was not sports biomechanics or kinesics. It was actually developmental progression. Everybody who's listening to this watched your baby crawl before they walked. And there were a lot of other movement patterns linking those together. And I promise you, if they walked correctly without a developmental problem, they hit every stage. Some kids stay longer at one stage. But if those are the operating system milestones to get upright and take off running and climb something and throw something and punch and kick something, then when is it okay to lose that operating system? That was the original hypothesis. Number one, these fundamental patterns should be reliable and easy to communicate up and downstream, from healthcare all the way to the golf pro and every person in between. Secondly, it's not a medical problem until one of these problems produces pain, because many of them are easily fixable by cleaning up your lifestyle or changing your exercise program in a path and a pace that you can consume in a measurable way. And you should never be able to post a better fitness number while robbing a functional expression of, say, balance or whole movement pattern, symmetry, or even ability. So the movement screen was simply our way of saying, let's go upstream. Either you're broken or you're doing something wrong, and we can fix this without having to get over analytical in healthcare as long as there's not pain. The minute there's pain, we don't know if the poor problem is causing the pain or the pain is actually causing the problem. That's where we got to go, upstream or microscopic and start doing stuff. And so a movement screen as a benchmark for wellness, movement health, or low risk of injury, we had to go upstream in clinical practice and say, listen, all good therapists and chiropractors are going to probably find the same ligament, the same muscle problem, the same trigger point. But how many are going to map out all the other BS going on in you that doesn't seem to be related to your shoulder pain, like that poor balance we got on your left leg or the fact that your T-spine won't rotate to the right? We used to just ignore that because insurance just paid us to rehab the shoulder. Now we know in our SFMA, with the help of, guys like Mike Voigt, Greg Rose, Kyle Kiesel, Phil Plisky, all these guys teaching SFMA, that if you do have movement pain, there's a logical breakdown, but don't just chase the pain. There are a lot of other mobility and stability problems that can become part of their self-care that will actually accelerate their rehab and leave them with lower risk than you found them. And our military studies say when our soldiers have a touch with rehab, they sometimes get their problem resolved, they sometimes don't, but that touch with rehabilitation does not reduce their future risk. And I think most people go through rehab assuming you're checking all the tires, not just the one that you were saying was flat, because it's a proactive thing that we do. And you were early in taking the same responsibility with Gerald Coopersmith, out at Equinox, saying, I think we can do more than just a facility tour on day one. We can tell you more about you than any fitness professional's ever told you, because they're shopping a program or a floor plan and not tying what they can do into the bottleneck that you got, those weakest links. And that's what we've been able to do. The way we've sort of reinvented corrective exercises, we don't just create local exercise around the mobility or stability problem, treating it like sets and reps fitness. We actually say we must treat this like a perceptive awareness problem first. We must make sure you have bad balance or limited range of motion. What's causing it is we're going to find that. But if you don't acknowledge, or if you're not aware of the problem, you're probably going to put yourself at risk, because you're going to bite off more or less than you can chew to make a positive difference. You're either not going to exercise in the right direction, or you're going to go into a situation where you're not prepared, but you think you are. So We've been doing that on the healthcare side and the fitness, strength, conditioning side. And then the two tools sort of support our endeavors in pro athletics, because it's real easy to make baseball all about arm care and not about child care, right? Or not about developmental. A guy like Tom House, he develops his pitchers from the ground up, but 15 iterations in, we got 8-year-olds only doing arm care, sometimes only on one side, and they have very poor balance and they can't deep squat. And we know all 12-year-olds could probably have a little bit better core and a little bit better ankle mobility. So isn't that where arm care starts? Don't have a upstream problem of where you're getting most of your power anyway. So anyway, we've sort of scratched that functional surface and said we all use the word functional, but when we use the word blood pressure, we got a standard to shoot for. When we got an eye chart, we got a standard to shoot for. And if we're functional professionals, let's just throw a standard in that me and you and Mike Boyle will all hit it differently, right? But we hold the standard to be that, and realize that we've got to fit our program to the human operating system. We can't hack it. This ain't tech. This is biology, and it's ancient. It likes to do it this way. So I guess in summary, that was my question. And you hit the nail on the head with that intro. I did try to look at movement more as a behavior than a mechanical number, because it's really easy to practice to the test, not to what the test represents. So I don't care what the ankle mobility measurement you say you have. If you can't deep squat, your ankle's either limited or something's not allowing you to express the full talent of your ankle in a loaded position. So it's not trying to rub anybody's nose in it. It's trying to rub my nose in my own forecast of, if your joints look good and I say your muscles are good, then movement patterns should be good. Well, we could reverse that and say, if movement patterns are good, the fundamentals and basics of symmetry, freedom, and control have been represented. Let's go ahead and talk about capacity or skill acquisition, because if you go after physical capacity or skill acquisition, and you have one of these fundamental reading, writing errors of, I perceive this, I move like this. If you have an error caused by a mobility, stability pattern, an asymmetry, poor control or whatever, you're going to actually have a physical obstacle you don't need to have. Ryan Holiday, the obstacle is away. You're going to have to face your ankle mobility or your poor rotation or your lack of ability to roll on one side, because this is a physical barrier to skill acquisition. Just like having your ears plugged up with that wax is going to put you at a disadvantage at music camp, right? Or having an eye patch on is going to make your depth perception and throwing much more skewed. We're going to question the lesson plan, your ability. You're working with half of what everybody else is working with. We should catch that on the front end. So people with these movement, common reading, writing errors and the mobility and stability, it's not what you think. Most of the flexibility problems we see are not hardened, tightened structural tissue that won't move and takes 8 weeks to change. It's somebody with their parking brake on. It's somebody with unnecessary tone or the inability to dump tension. And most of our corrective strategy is focused at, let's dump tension. All right, now let's make appropriate tension. And most people skip over the stuff like happy baby and sun salutation and playful Turkish get-ups and Indian clubs and go right into this vigorous tissue rolling, not realizing that you're the one bringing the tone with the way you stand, with the way you lift, with the fact that you avoid single leg deadlifts because they make you look wobbly, Yeah. So all this tension would dump if you'd actually, explore mobility and stability and breathing simultaneously and sort of unpack these movement problems. So that's what we got into, and seeing it like a behavior allows us all to apply a little bit of that psychology 101 and realize if they're not aware of a reading and writing error, they will continue to do it the same way. They will continue to compensate, even though you're telling them every day what they're doing wrong.
Yeah.
They're not hearing it with their body. They're hearing it with their ears, and they don't speak movement. We speak movement. They do movement. So. Yeah.
And I think it's funny because you really, I think over time, look, the bottom line is when I first saw you speak in 2005 at Athletes Performance, and it's funny because I had given Geraldine Cooper-Smith Athletic Body and Balance and the video cassette, the cassette, the VCR cassette to watch, and she actually gave it back to me like a couple weeks later, like, I haven't been able to watch this. And then when I went to see you guys at Athletes Performance, I had already gone to a mentorship and I'd learned FMS with Darcy Norman and Mark Verstegen at Athletes Performance, but then we saw you guys speak that weekend. And then I approached you guys in the parking lot saying, wow, I work at Equinox. I know the Equinox Fitness, Geraldine Cooper-Smith, the head of the education there. And when I went back, I screened her and a bunch of other people, because the number one mistake everybody always makes is they get their weekend course and they go right to doing it on their clients. I screened all the other colleagues, and she was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Then I had to go down and screen David Harris, and that was the start of kind of you guys, at least that initial step into Equinox. But the thing was, like you said, I was doing these, and I was new to this industry at that time. I was... something was missing. Like you said, you got to give them more than a tour on that first day. And I knew something was missing, and I felt like what I had learned from you, for anybody that doesn't know, Gray was the first person I ever saw speak. I was not even in the fitness business. I was still in the bar business, who was contemplating the fitness business. And I saw you at the Jewish Community Center with Peter Twist. I think it was a personal training on the net event. And
yes, it was. Good Lord.
Yeah.
I think I was such a new to, see, I was lecturing when we used to carry a slide deck and a carousel. And I was in the transition of doing the PowerPoint off your laptop, and I didn't plug my computer in. Biggest freshman mistake in presentations is I'm doing a presentation on battery power, right?
Yeah.
Remember that? And yeah, Twisty was there, man. That was fun.
And what's interesting is you recommended two books, brand new books. It was Core Performance by Mark Verstegen and Functional Training for Sports. I got them. It changed I said, I got those books. And I said, between the three of you, I was like, man, I am doing it. I made the plunge. I went to Equinox. I went to Athletes Performance Mentorship, and the rest is history. But the funny thing is, when I started this podcast, Mike had asked Mike had asked you a question, and you had sent him. It was crazy, the timing. Instead of writing this whole email, you had sent him an audio version, like you recorded something. And Mike, can you use this? And Mike's like, can you use this? I'm like, are you kidding me? And that was the first, literally the timing was amazing because it was the first podcast. But, and like we said, we were putting out fires for 5 or 6 years, trying to answer questions. I think a lot of misinterpretation. People always want to misinterpret, or they just read or listen to the sound bites and made their interpretations. Like, hey, listen, read the whole article first. Listen first before you make those decisions. But, Greg, I want to kind of get into this because I do only have a half hour. It's totally different now. I don't have my own space. I'm in a co-working space. I'm in a podcasting room, so I only have till 12. But in Business and Movement, you talk a little bit about some different terms, and I just want you to define really quick. Define movement culture, and what are movement obstacles that are going to get in our way?
Okay. First of all, movement culture. If you got a kid in baseball, tennis, gymnastics, swimming, soccer, traveling around, playing maybe 2 seasons of the same sport, you're invested in that culture. Now, there's a physical aspect to that, and there's a social aspect to that, and there's a technical or skill aspect to that. And what we've found is sports culture somehow either tries to hack physical success to support skill and competition, or they only support the sport-specific training and don't support the fundamentals of movement that you and I both know underpin a lot of how successful athletes do it for a little bit longer, a little bit less cumbersome. That's why we got a station at most of the pro combines. It's not because the FMS does anything miraculous. It's one additional piece of information that lets you know, number one, what's this person's potential? Because if they're doing this good with fundamental mobility and stability problems, and that's the biggest misconception, is when we see, warriors and physical specimens and pro athletes, their movement screens are no better than in what's in most CrossFit boxes right now, another physical culture. And so our physical culture is influenced by that which we like to do socially and together and the skill set we're trying to develop. But then what's the training under that? When you get into SEAL culture, there is a physical standard you must maintain. You don't have to be that fast. You just can't be this slow. You don't have to have cold exposure longer than Wim Hof, but you better be able to handle it for 15 minutes. So they have these nice minimums. And if you can't make the minimums, you can't stay here. Well, we realize that every physical environment has minimums of skill, which are vetted in testing and competition and coaching. And it's also got minimums in physical durability, your ability to show up day after day, not your ability to resist injury, because there's a lot of things feeding into that injury. But the way that I think it's best to talk about all these things is risk and readiness. We have the technology now to do both. You and I are wearing an Oura ring, and we probably told a lot of people to at least get some type of device and monitor some of the upstream things that affect your movement. One of our military studies basically said a whole batch of guys that we absolutely knew were sleep deprived and dehydrated got a movement screen. Now, we knew what their previous movement screen was, but their movement screen on this day was, significantly lower, 3 or 4 points lower on a standard and reliable scale that's, been time tested. Now, had I not known what was upstream of the last 36 hours these guys had been participating in, I was getting ready to issue exercise and stretching advice and stability correctives and stuff like that. Instead of saying, we got to get you hydrated and a couple more, REM cycles and some deep sleep, buddy. And then, boom, here's movement again. Now, if we can see it that quick in a snapshot, how many of our clients are showing up, using stimulants in place of good, ketogenic energy and not understanding that, hey, you're not bodybuilding at your age. You don't even need that much protein. What you need is a slightly empty belly and a good digestive cycle and a good REM cycle. And we'll know where to push. We'll know where to do the constructive stress, because if we stress you too hard, we're going to screw up your balance or flexibility or stability. And doing something like a Y balance test or a motor control screen is a good signature of your subconscious abilities today, right? There's certain days when maybe your hearing or seeing could be better. There's certain days when your reaction time, movement, motor control is going to be better. And knowing the days that this is decalibrated is one of your recovery days, where you go run through your yoga stuff, or you really go super slow on a Turkish get-up, or do something that doesn't require a lot of complexity like carries, right? And then on the day when your state of readiness is elevated, that's the day you bite off a little bit more. But to learn from guys like Tony Hawk and Laird Hamilton, you don't bite off 20% more. You die, right? Especially if you're a big wave surfer or you're doing flips off a half pipe. Yeah. You bite off 4% more. That sort of skill challenge ratio that most of us get wrong. And the way I'm trying to sum it up in the lectures around the business of movement is I'm saying most people are trying to work out with a problem. And if they don't have a current problem, like pain on a movement pattern or an obvious flexibility or stability issue, they're on the wrong path. They're pursuing strength when they should capture more fundamental mobility first. They're pursuing power when their balance is off. From your experience with Titleist, can't finish on that front leg. It's only going to be back pain real soon, real bad. That's just it. You can't finish on your back leg. So we know these fundamental signatures we're looking for. So you're on the wrong path, or you're actually doing the right thing at the wrong pace. Not enough, not often enough, too much. So that's my sort of move well, move often in a nutshell. If you got a problem, you're not moving well, let's just go find the problem, not try to cover it up with a program. But if you don't have a problem, or you've had a problem that you don't want to recur, let's look at what path you're on. And your worst movement pattern will probably help us unpack that. And let's look at your pace, and your heart rate variability will tell us that. And whether you're following sort of a Wim Hof pre-exercise prep or more of a Phil Maffetone, let's hit that low cardio and get you ultra efficient at, the lowest cardio, where you go ketogenic and you can pretty much cardio with your mouth closed and get all your nasal breathing like James Nestor says we need. And he's absolutely right. Let's vet your problem. Let's get you on the right path, and let's figure out your pace with the feedback loops we've already laid in place. Like, do you have any more pain with movement, or are you clearing these movement patterns? And in a nutshell, that's a hard thing for a new movement professional to say, because that's not the way you and I were taught. So I'm sort of giving people permission to say, hey, if we at phys ed, sports conditioning, personal training, and clinical musculoskeletal health, if we're not willing to go upstream and talk openly about the self-care that makes our job easier, help me help you. If we're not willing to talk about that, and all we're going to do is issue, put a strap on this, put a bungee cord on that, smash that, roll this, that's not the way you fix movement. You go upstream and get everything else too, because how many of your clients are showing up sleep deprived, dehydrated, with psychosocial stress and unnecessary muscle tone that a anxious, sedentary, fast-paced, high-tech lifestyle is basically going to cause? And we've demonstrated people pick up points on their movement screen by quitting their obsession, like a runner who's running about a third too much for their frame. Yeah, all we do is cut their running back, and they pick up mobility and stability without any correctives at all. So, that's what I'm trying to say is you can't describe how this is going to happen. You just set up these incremental aha moments and bottlenecks, show them, hey, you can't touch your toes, and I want you to try as hard as you can. but if you'll do it like this, then you can. And that's where that whole toe touch progression, that plasticity and movement sort of showcase came. We did it at AP, and we were flipping a few things, and people didn't think movement could change that fast. And I'm like, well, if it's eroded joint or a bad tissue restriction or burn tissue, it won't. But if it's a bad motor program, you better believe you can cut off your phone and turn it back on, and all your apps run clean. And sometimes that's what we have to do. We have to go down to that fundamental level where movement's broken, turn you off, turn you back on, help you reset. Oh, there it is. And so many people don't know how to test that. It's really easy to say, oh, well, you got an arthritic knee for your age. And by the way, we can replace them in 42 minutes now. And we're putting total knees in 40-year-olds. And I don't know if we're offering a lot of upstream care or self-care first. It's just so easy to put that knee in. Now, the person receiving it, not realizing if you do live to 80, you're getting 3 more. And because you can't grow that bone back. So we got to keep replacing it.
Yeah. Great. It's interesting. Let's talk more about this self-care idea, because I love this. What you talked about in the book was in the intro is if the events of the pandemic have shown us anything, it's people are seeking movement opportunities that offer greater levels of independence as they learn more about rehabilitating themselves and exercising on their own. And it's funny you brought up Titleist, because one of the barriers that I had owning 5-Iron Fitness and getting golf pros on board at the time in one of the most highly golf dense areas in the world in Westchester County in New York was this idea of people were so guarded. Golf pros were so guarded that they were thinking, well, if Gray comes and takes a lesson from me a couple times a month, and I send him over to Anthony, who's at 5-Iron Fitness, he's going to spend money with Anthony. He's not going to come back to me. And I think a lot of fitness pros are worried about losing business by teaching people about self-care. Can you just expand on this idea?
All right. I'm a music teacher. You're coming for singing lessons or public speaking lessons. I know you're not a diaphragm breather, and I got a lot of tricks to help you with your diaphragm. But you say, I'm thinking about getting a personal trainer, and I'm going to do some cardio because I know I could be a little fitter for my age. I know my cardiovascular output or work capacity could easily be better. You think that'll help my public speaking and my singing and maybe my posture and my delivery? And your music coach or your public speaking coach would say, hell yeah. How does that hurt their job? It doesn't. It helps their job.
Exactly.
Because you can't do all this diaphragmatic postural T-spine mobility training when you're working on skill. That's the way I think Greg Rose and myself and guys like you wanted the golf pro to see this. I'm not stealing the lesson. This person has disposable income. However,
Absolutely.
You're hitting a physical barrier to skill acquisition, and your success is going to be much slower than it needs to be. You'd like to get on with a lesson where you could get through technique into course management, up and down, difficult shots, complex plays. You want to get there, but you're never going to get there because they got balance that won't even make it through a field sobriety test. So they're going to be, with this wide external rotated stance, you can only do but so much with that. And so, they're all in agreement that their kid playing a wind instrument could benefit from cardio, but then they don't want their golfers getting better balance, hip mobility and ankle mobility from you. They just got to rethink that. And I think sometimes if we come at it like a Mark Twain, oh shucks, this guy's getting ready to drop 500 on a putter. I'm not stealing lessons from you, dude.
Yeah, exactly. No, I agree.
You look better. Yeah.
Now, and I think it's translated as well the same way with personal trainers not being afraid to, thinking they can become quote unquote a back specialist and or a I can help your knee pain. And there's a time to do that. Don't get me wrong, but they're afraid to refer out, or they're afraid to kind of teach people about, nose breathing, about the importance of doing all of those other things when they're not with us.
No, what you got to realize is we in healthcare have to realize when we get a referral from a coach or a trainer, you're their guy, you're their gal, you're their confidant, their mentor, their advisor. We are a temporary service provider. We never get between you. We simply speak to you as any other professional we would get a referral from, and we speak to them and say, these are the limitations I see in your health and your function that could be opportunities to enhance your fitness. One of those opportunities is, let's not push so hard in this direction and let's double down in this direction. The metabolic conditioning is going to be exactly the same, right? But the path is going to be changed by 5 degrees, and you should be able to do this, this, and this. So that's what I think we talked about in our physical capacity screen. What we did is develop this general physical capacity screen that we can apply to any sport, just looking at fundamentals of postural control, motor control, power, and impact control. And what we said is, we can clean up your movement screen and post really impressive numbers over here in fitness simply because we unburdened the system. I didn't strengthen you. I de-inhibited you. I balanced you out. I made you self-aware. I showed you how to breathe on recovery, because battling ropes isn't about what you're doing when you're waving the ropes. How quick can you recover and do it again is where I really use something like kettlebell swings or battling ropes. I basically want to see how quickly you can recover yourself and then get right back in the fight again. So the pattern you're doing, as long as it's clean, is interesting to me. The way you conserve energy within the pattern is interesting to me, and the way you recover after. If you're doing long sustainable, I start looking at your posture, your balance, your mechanics and stuff. And so it's really neat to see people find that one little weak link in their touch with me. And then all of a sudden they got this great creativity with their trainer, with their coach, and they can go on, forward again. I mean, nobody gives John Tureen the credit he deserves for managing Peyton Manning's ailing neck for all the years he did, because Peyton's neck just didn't get bad during the lockout in his transition between the Colts and the Broncos. Peyton, just like any other Achilles in the world, has his heel. And John, as a strength coach, one of the best proactive strength coaches that I know, was managing that with no fanfare or fanciness or alarms. He was just doing what he does that a trainer who's helping a golfer with a balance problem does. There's a physical weak link. There's a physical obstacle to the skill you're doing. What can I do to support that? That's strength and conditioning. That's training at its finest.
Absolutely. And, obviously over the years we had John on, and he was a great example of like a guy just really behind the scenes and a constant education from so many different perspectives. Kind of reminds me of like even like an Al Vermeil. Like, people don't realize how much extra education those guys got people to come into their places. John was certainly was the same way. Certainly no stranger to this podcast as well. Done stuff on his own, stuff for functional movement systems. But great. Can you go over right now, just to kind of take a step back, because we have the functional movement screen, selective functional movement assessment. We have the Y balance test, fundamental capacity screen, and the functional breathing screen. Can you just give an overview of each one for people? Because, like I said, we haven't had you on the podcast in a while, and I want to make sure people understand what those differences are.
Okay. Let's start with the SFMA. If you have movement pain, and you already know you have movement pain, right, in a daily movement, an athletic movement or whatever, the SFMA is set up to break out about 7 major movement patterns. We want to know, are these patterns just painful, but actually pretty functional in the way you move in them? Or are they pain-free and maybe dysfunctional? Like, it doesn't hurt my back in this position, but I still can't touch my toes. Okay, we call that dysfunction. Whereas if I can touch my toes, but it hurts, I say, well, you look functional, but you're painful within that range. So what we do as chiropractors, physical therapists, athletic trainers, is we do the same movement appraisal that you're going to get in any clinic, but we mark all those other flaws in movement that we don't think are related to your pain, because between me and you, Anthony, we can sometimes change those very, very quickly. Then we can go back and look at that thing that hurt you and see if that little adjustment has any play at all. Is it ever 100% of the problem? Sometimes we look like heroes. Is it never a contributing factor? Rarely. What you get to adjust is say, how many flaws does this person have other than their painful complaint? So that's our way of compartmentalizing pain behavior, but tracking dysfunction as upstream as we can and seeing how quick you respond. In the movement screen, we're going to assume that you don't have pain, but you're going into a new environment. You're transitioning between seasons. You're starting a new fitness program. You're going from junior high to high school. We want to get a movement screen on you, just like we want to get a physical in height and weight. You shouldn't have pain on a movement screen, but if you do, we already know where to go because I just talked about it. The movement screen can't tell you why you're in pain, but it tells you you need to get that broken out. That's going to be a dead weight on everything you're getting ready to do physically. But in the movement screen, we get opportunity to see, do you have any risk factors? Are you actually the person in this group that's probably going to have more unnecessary injuries than others? Where we see that correlate is when you have, 3 or 4 really bad movement patterns. John Tureen, once again, has said this. You can have one bad movement pattern. We probably all do. But if you got 2 or 3, they're going to rip you in half competing over who makes you compensate the most. So it's this aggregate problem we get with the FMS. But when we threw it out in research, people tried to turn it into a total score, just like your sleep rating on your Oura Ring. It doesn't really work that way. Just don't have deficiencies at any of these movement stations. Each one is a fundamental building block for reciprocal function, which gets us right back to the platform that probably made Mike Boyle unbelievably insightful and famous, which is don't forget single leg competence is the best platform for double leg competence. Right? You be strong on one leg. I'm not worried about your squat or your deadlift. If you're strong on both, we can easily gather the skill, but a lot of athletic movements are way, predominant on weight shifting in one foot more than the other. So the movement screen just breaks down those fundamentals and truly shows you how your flexibility, mobility, stability, whatever, is affecting your ability to perform, because it's hurting what you feel, it's inhibiting that, and it's also limiting what you can express for the exact same reason for biomechanics. The FCS is our sort of fundamental capacity exam. If you're pretty physical and pretty functional in your movement, but you want to know where your next training path should be, we've got a station for your extremity strength, which is sort of your signature hips and shoulders and how the symmetry they have. We've got a carry test that looks at your postural integrity under control. We got a dissected jump, and we got a hop test. So we're basically exploring the same things that Tarzan and every other wild human had: run, jump, carry, and climb. These are the expressions of work capacity when there's no such thing as exercise or fitness behind it. These are how humans express themselves: run, jump, carry, and climb. And there's a way to unpack that. If you got a functional problem or a painful problem, we want that baseline, because now we know your work capacity with this limitation. We don't work on your work capacity. We go down and remove the limitation, check your work capacity. If you don't have any of those problems, we know the only way you're going to get more powerful in your golf swing, Anthony, is the biggest hole you got is not your power. It's your posture. And Greg Rose now has one additional test to show you that. We clean up your posture, there's 10% more power, but now there's competency in both training power. So we got you ready to get the thing you want before we went right for that. And too many people go right for that sport-specific, similar movement pattern and don't underpin what's under it. Now, I gave you 3 different stations. I gave you move with pain, you just want to get your movement signature, and you want to check your functional capacity. Now we got 2 other tests you mentioned, this breathing screen and this Y balance test. They can be administered across the board at any time to any of these tests to say, we can actually go deep on your balance and dissect it out. And that's a good signature of how quickly you're getting better. Just like you already know if your kid's got a fever, but the thermometer tells you if it's 101 or 104. 104 is going to the ER and 101 gets Tylenol, right? So the movement screen tells you got bad balance. But if you want to dial it in, if you've got a long-term problem, if you're coming through Y balance test is the MRI to the functional movement X-ray that one of our tests just provided. understanding if you've got a breathing problem is key, because we're going to incorporate some significant breathing changes into your movement. And the one that I can tell your listeners right now is we reverse your breathing sequence. So say I'm doing a kettlebell swing. I'm going to sniff in on the up and I'm going to blow out on the down. Now, I'm not saying that Pavel's not right with a hard style swing, but that's a max capacity swing. People that already have core stability are bracing incorrectly from a fundamental level that they're not aware of. Sniffing in air on the upswing creates the intra-abdominal pressure that Brett Jones now has automatically. So I go light on a kettlebell swing as I'm rehabbing from my hernia and neck surgery, reverse my breathing sequence, exhale on the down, and I'm almost getting a Wim Hof light kettlebell workout. If I apply the rest breaks Pavel talks about, I'm getting unbelievably strong, but it's because I'm getting more stable and syncing my core, my breath, and my power. So if we get to that thing with breathing where we find you have a breathing compromise, we're going to add a breathing signature on top of every corrective or movement pattern that's going to give you a competitive advantage preloading your core with a breath sequence that will soon become automatic if you practice the skill long enough. So we have 3 different stations, but on those stations, your breathing and balance is important to us, and we don't want to see a problem. But if we do, we know exactly where to go there. So,
all right, good stuff. Now, with the business of movement, do I need, and that's why I wanted to do the overall, give us the overview of functional movement systems. Do I need to know all of these things? Can I just be certified in functional movement screen? Do I even have to know that to get something out of the book?
No, as a matter of fact, I honestly think if most professionals, whether they've had our education and training and even possess a certification or not, I think it's pretty clear what each of our tools is trying to do. Now, we haven't had a lot of competition in the FMS space because a lot of people either build it into their programming or pre-screen a different way. But our point is, we're trying to cover the levels of movement. Health is your current state of readiness. Wellness is your future state of readiness. Fitness is your current level of physical capacity, and we like to match that to your environment. And your overall production is how you doing with that, right? Are you a good dad, or are you getting your sleep in, or is your golf score staying where you want it to, or are you maintaining your body comp, right? What's your overall productivity? And if we can find a hole in you below that productivity, we don't question your productivity. We question why is that hole there and what can we do about it? And what I wrote the book for is to say functional movement systems is the way we blend these data points together. And we're in an information overload situation where I think a lot of people go to the internet, they'll find exactly what they're looking for. They don't create an experience around that new information, and they don't have really objective reflection on what did it do for me. Therefore, sometimes the only good benchmark of a workout is that really kicked my ass. Well, it's hard to measure a good ass kicking, So this whole thing about, we know we're a sedentary culture. We know we eat too much and don't do enough. So we must deserve this punishing beatdown when we do get a half hour, because how else will we pay the penance for this, life of gluttony? It's not like that at all. It's the incremental atomic habits do it. One of the things I try to do in the business of movement is talk to business owners, movement professionals, anybody in this chain from movement education, physical education, sports coaching, personal training, strength conditioning, group exercise, wellness, martial arts, yoga, and then all the rehab professionals and medical professionals. It's, are you really doing what you're telling them to do, right? Do you really think there's such a thing as a magic bullet nutritional supplement or exercise supplement? Or do you realize it's this big lifestyle that they got to get their head around? Because you're a specialist in some aspect of movement, but is that really what the problem is here? I know that's the program you want to sell and the service you want to provide, but is that really the problem? So how do we handle our teenage athletes when they come in? We ask them if they're stomach sleepers. We ask them how much they're sleeping. We talk to them about what's your protein level? And we already know their body comp. If you've got a teenage athlete with their body comp is not where it should be on the low or high end, they got a nutrition problem, okay? Because most of them are working hard enough. They're probably, already having some insulin sensitivity at a very young age. Remember, we used to call it type 2 adult onset diabetes. Now we call it type 2 because we gave it to kids. That's way more eating than exercise. So we often think that the solution for a movement problem is a different exercise or more of this exercise and less of that. That's not what we're facing right now. The pandemic showed us that overall general activity is way better than not. And your movement, your balance, your BMI, your metabolic risk factors, your musculoskeletal risk factors, they're all compounding. And once you hit a certain level, you're at risk for anything. COVID, the flu, or a fall, right? Your body is eroding sort of together. And what we found out, Anthony, is when I looked hard into it, and I tried to articulate this in the business movement, movement's the canary in the coal mine. Once your mom has high blood pressure, harm is done. The elasticity in her vascular system is compromised. It may resort back to an earlier level, but the healthcare system doesn't really manage metabolic risk well, because by the time you have metabolic syndrome, you've already got metabolic disease. Well, syndrome is supposed to be the way we get proactive on this. So I'm throwing out, what about musculoskeletal syndrome? If your kid has an ACL, they're temporarily compromised. And they are until the tests say they're not. Just like any other aptitude or competency test would. We're doing it to provide you safety and structure getting out of this hole, not to keep you from doing what you want to do, but to get you there quicker. It just doesn't look like plyometrics yet. And a lot of parents aren't okay with that. Well, I wanted to provide a lot of the people who believe like you and I, hard, objective, scientific data that says there's two ways to look at risk: the threat of the environment and the vulnerability of the individual. And that's not my words. That's Stanley McChrystal, one of our ex-generals, just talking about the logistics of risk. Certain sports threaten ankle sprains more. Certain sports, threaten shoulder injuries more. Certain lifestyles threaten heart attacks more, right? So we know that this is the threat if you're in this environment. What we don't know is what's your individual vulnerability. What are your Achilles heels? And stacking those up on the front end helps us make this easier for you on the back end. And so many kids that are deemed middle linebackers or baseball players get put into a workout package that's way more about the position they're getting ready to play than the person that they're bringing to the position. And, I think Hippocrates said that it's better to know the man with the disease than the disease that has the man, right? If you know this person, there's a lot of different ways to play, let's fix your ankle mobility, right? And one of them's going to work better for one person and one of them's going to work better for another person, but we're guilty of it in rehab and in training and in physical education and coaching. We get one way of teaching, and all of a sudden our sacred playbook that we've been doing for 20 years is the same, even though the population is changing before your eyes. So we got to pivot. We got to see this. And the business of movement is recognizing those assumptions that you're making in your own life, apply them to you. The best way to get wise on how to discuss somebody's weak link is to get less sensitive about discussing yours. So take your knowledge, put some experience to it, convert it to wisdom. I swear your speeches to your patients, your clients, your athletes, your students come across with way more integrity, even though the words will be the same, because you're speaking from an experience that you personally have had and a vulnerability that you personally confronted. And it will be somehow similar to the teaching moment you're trying to create for them. So the first part of the business of movement is aim the damn spotlight at yourself. I did, and it only hurt a little bit, but it hurt a long time. But it really helped me manage multiple orthopedic surgeries, born with an inguinal hernia and had it replaced a bunch of times, and, dealing with Lyme disease and some musculoskeletal problems. I mean, I'm not immune to all that. I just got to deal with it and movement is the canary in the coal mine. Almost every other ailment or problem you have, we've got a pharmaceutical to cover it up. If your balance is bad, it doesn't get better unless you do the right thing. And if your movement patterns are bad, they don't get better unless you quit insulting your body or stressing your body in a reasonable way. So we found the canary in the coal mine is very often you're moving bad before your BMI gets bad. You're moving bad before you have low back pain. You're moving bad before your golf score starts going back up. And we can see it. Let's not, gloss over the canary in the coal mine with a few correctives that help you tolerate a bad lifestyle. Let's go upstream on ourselves and other people and say, hey, I got some great exercises for you. But if you're not going to change your oil and rotate your tires and check your brake fluid, it ain't going to work. You gotta have self-care, and your Oura ring tells me you got 2 holes here. Let's get your readiness up, and I'll throw more exercise at you. You keep it down. This is all we can do without blowing it up.
Yeah. And I think a part of the problem is it's not very sexy, right? I mean, we're looking at this, this social media stuff, and people want to have their cake before they have their steak, right? So it's one of the challenges we face with this. And I think it's one of the challenges you guys faced a lot of as well in the beginning. It's like, you've been saying this same stuff for so long, but at the same time, people were like, well, I don't want to be in a corrective exercise, just doing corrective exercises for 6 months. Nobody ever said for you to do that. There's a way to go about this. And you even have, this is not just a book by Gray Cook. There's contributions in here from movement professionals that are very skilled in FMS, and some of your teachers, people like Eric Degatti, Frank Dolan. This is really a good, well-rounded, like, hey, there is a way to attack this and overcome some of the challenges that we have in this industry.
No, and I think you're a good example of this, and a lot of the people that are probably going to be showing up to perform better are a good example of this too. There will be significant limitations and changes in the future resources you have as a coach, as a trainer, as a clinician. We are not restricting your resourcefulness, right? That's what this book is all about. I'm giving you sort of a matrix with which to sort your particular system, your service, your product. And where are the holes? Is this a hole that you can only pay for to close, or are there other things you can do? And the best training me and Lee Burton ever had is a tightwad owner in our first clinic where we collaborated that wouldn't spend money on anything. So we just had to figure out other ways to do it. If I could have got a force plate and a camera back in the late 90s, I wouldn't have invented the movement screen with a piece of PVC fencing and a stick, But I'm glad I did, because it serves as a standard for us to get tech up to, and to stay, no matter how hard they try, they ain't got a camera that'll do what that'll do. Am I saying there won't be one? No, it'll be one within 5 years. But it's probably going to follow a little bit more of a facial recognition shape thing than it will what's your ankle mobility, because 38 is good, but 36 you do this. And so many people had tried to have a one-station, camera-driven, overhead deep squat proxy, and it just doesn't work. And even if it did, what do you work on to fix the squat? Your leg raise, you push your shoulder mobility. Depends on what their scores are. You see, so many people have already tried to abbreviate or make the movement screen easier. And what we've tried to say is, listen, Einstein said, make things as simple as possible, but no simpler. If you don't lean in and see how to measure the movement screen, you'll never be able to check your influence on something reliable and objective that a lot of early adopters embrace. So if no more reason, it's not about drinking Graham-Lee's Kool-Aid as it is, this is a pretty keen way to check your global effect on somebody's movement. And so when people see, Anthony Renna or Greg Rose do a toe touch progression on stage and somebody picks up 8 inches of what appears to be flexibility, we all know their fascia didn't change that much. They reorganized their alignment. They changed their timing. You added a breathing sequence, and they blasted right through a parking brake that they didn't realize was on. That's what's happening. And if you don't learn something like the movement screen then you're going to be stuck in your own subjectivity or their subjective report. So we learn to take blood pressure. We learn to use eye charts. We learn to do movement screens. And then we can form opinions, informed, objective opinions about what effect did you leave on movement today. Because when we're working with players and operators, I don't ever want to do anything in a warm-up to make their state of readiness worse. And I don't want to ever do anything in a workout to make their risk rating worse. Well, we can measure both those now, right? Your balance in your movement for the day, along with your heart rate variability, is a great readiness indicator. And believe it or not, looking at your movement screen, your balance, your BMI, your pain with movement, your past medical history, and your ankle mobility, we can basically accumulate risk factors. Kyle Kiesel has assembled a lit review of 16 of them that are probably going to be published pretty soon. But the ones that we went through are, there's actionable and observational. I don't attack your body comp directly. I attack your movement and efficiency, your pain behavior, your sleep, your nutrition, and then your BMI changes, not the other way around. And so there's a lot of risk factors, but how many of these are actionable? Like balance, movement, lifestyle, your cycles and your patterns, and how many are actually the downstream aggregate of that, a constantly swollen ankle or a BMI you wish you could change. So we don't go right for the obvious or visible. We go for the cracks in the armor, and then we don't worry about the strength of the armor.
Good stuff. Great. I want to finish up on this. It's funny. There was a movie called Sliding Doors. I think Gwyneth Paltrow was in it. It was probably in the 90s. And it was a story of like kind of if she goes through this one door and they kind of follow her through this way. And then she goes through the other door and she meets this man and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, Lee had said last year in the and I don't know if you're going to kill him or if you totally agree with this, but Lee had said in his lecture at Perform Better, in that first one in December, he said, kind of think if we had to do it all over again, instead of the number system, we might employ the red, yellow, green light system because of just so much the perception, there's so much confusion, the way people interpreted things, etc. And you actually have a little section in there about red, yellow, green light system. Talk to me about this statement. Would you want to do it over again? If you did have to do it over again, would you do this system? Just expand on this.
I'm at the point where I'm still doing 4 states of movement: a painful state, an unacceptable state, an acceptable state, and an exceptional state. So whether we have characters, lights, numbers, we have to accept these 4 states that movement can express itself in. So as long as there's 4 stations, otherwise we go to binary. The only binary we can have is, do you have pain or not, right? Do you have competency here or not? We go up through it that way. So I have been sort of one of the advocates of, I don't have to tell these numbers to my clients, my patients, my athletes. They're not necessary. What you want to know, Anthony, if I'm looking at your blood work, is your calcium is tanked, and you could definitely do better on potassium. However, your testosterone is high. You want my appraisal of what the numbers say. You haven't memorized whether your testosterone should be 700 or 1,000, right? So why would you bore the person in front of you with anything other than the weakest link that you currently see through the tests and assessments you've done, and the minimum effective dose it's going to take to change that? Because everything else is bullshit and showmanship, right? What's my weakest link? What's my bottleneck? And what's the least I can possibly do to make it change? Because anything that doesn't identify the weakest link is not going to really have a global effect. And if we don't argue for the minimum effective dose, they won't do it, right? We can always maximize, say, well, I want you to do this 5 days a week. Can I only do it once? Once isn't going to change anything. How about twice? Haven't seen real good results. 3 times minimum, 5 times I like better. Okay. And so that's what I do. I don't really get into this negotiation with people. Here's your weakest link. and I've looked at it from 3 different directions, right? And here's the least you can do to change it. And I'm willing to back that up and test it if you want to do this on your own with moderate supervision, if you want to do it online, or if you want to work with me. And I honestly think that, that's what I learned from a guy like Ray Dalio, who is an actual businessman. I'm not a businessman, but I do know that I can't sell shit I won't consume. And that's an integrity point that I want movement professionals to realize. You believe a lot more things in movement than you're allowed to dispense right now, because it's hard to explain, it's inconvenient, and it's not the way that, the last fitness professional talked. Who gives a shit, right? Make them self-aware. And nobody who I've ever done a toe touch progression on, a little toe touch miracle on, ever said, well, I don't believe that. Shit just happened, man. Lightning just struck. We can explain it later, but what I'm trying to show you is your situation is more plastic than you think. And if I can recognize where you're plastic and where you're not, I know where your weak links are, and I want to help you change them. That's my radical transparency and algorithmic thinking. Those are 2 things Ray Dalio says in his book, and I really brought those to heart. That's one thing that I think fixes coaching and physical education and rehabilitation is just, let's just be transparent about what we see, and let's think algorithmically about how we're going to change it and what kind of ownership are we willing to take. And so that's what the book's all about. I sort of get wordy in some places, but by the time you get in the book, that little 4x4 matrix, I want you to fill it out for yourself before you do the next person you want to help, because you put the oxygen on yourself first and you can help more people. They'll tell you that on every flight you get on, even nowadays. So, that's one thing I don't think we do. We're soldiers, and we offer way better advice to people than we consume on our own. We tell them to take time to meditate, exercise, sleep better, clean their diet, and then we just do what we got to do. So I think that I've learned to clean things up in my own life, and they've actually helped me become more articulate when I find bottlenecks with other people and see these senseless negotiations, about how much or how little they should do. This is the least you can do and make a difference, and here's your bottleneck. That's as honest as I can be with you. Let's either do the ride together, or let me make you a plan and we'll reach out to you later.
Yeah, amen to that. Well, Gray, I've taken enough of your time. I'll remind everybody, the new book is called The Business of Movement. You can listen to Lee and Gray on the Movement podcast. So, Gray, it was great to catch up with you. Got to do this more often. Thank you for doing this, and good luck with this with the book.
No, I'm enjoying it, because the more I get to talk about it, I actually like. I help one clinician, and I keep him in the fight way longer, so I can touch a lot of lives by getting to coaches and trainers and people who should be practicing more self-care, like it's taken me 56 years to learn. So I think we're all doing that. You and I have been reading the tea leaves for a while, and if we're adding it to our own life, we're already looking for ways to help other people with it. And that's what this was. So.
All right, that's going to do for episode 338 of the Strength Coach Podcast. You can try the new strengthcoach.com out for 7 days for free. Just got to give them your credit card. Totally new format, user-friendly, the same great forum. It's the place where top coaches in the industry come to connect and learn. Go to strengthcoach.com. Click the Join Now button to get started on your free trial. Special thanks to Chris Poirier and the folks over at Perform Better. Remember, check out the sale at performbetter.com. The summits are back. July 15th to the 17th in Chicago, August 26th to the 28th in Providence. Check it all out at performbetter.com. Thanks to Coach Boyle and Gray Cook for sharing their insights and philosophies into the world of strength and conditioning, performance enhancement, and the business of movement. Thanks to Naamly, helping build relationships through personalized communication so your members stay longer and pay longer. Go to Naamly.com. Use the referral code StrengthCoach to get started on your free 30-day trial. Thanks to Vince Gabriele and Kiss Marketing. If you need some help with your marketing, head over to kissmarketing.net to book a free coaching call with Will Matheson, Vince Gabriele's secret marketing weapon. Go to kissmarketing.net to book your free coaching call. Thanks to Nika Ouellette and Perch. Perch is a 3D camera-based weight room technology solution bringing VBT into the 21st century. Guys, head over to Perch athleticgreens.fit/strength coach. Find out more about it. They have some great videos there showing the cameras and how to use it. Thanks to Athletic Greens. Visit athleticgreens.com/strength coach. Get your free year supply of vitamin D and 5 free travel packs today. A reminder about Inside Tracker. Get 20% off with the code RENAPRO20. That's my last name, RENAPRO20 at InsideTracker.com. Guys, my name's Anthony Rena. Check out the show notes at ContinueFit.com. That's going to do it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and I'll speak to you next time.